The Afterworld is a world of magic and anomalies, causing things like nuclear volcanoes, oceans of glowing blood, a living IRS office, and creatures that seem to have been raised on diets of meth, steroids, and nightmare fuel. Life in the Afterworld is descended and evolved from life on Earth, because one of the Afterworld's anomalies is that things that die on Earth appear in the Afterworld. This includes humans, which in the Afterworld have become very, very varied. This video has timestamps in the description and pinned comment, so you can skip anything you're not interested in, because I hate you and disrespect your time. Apologies for how long it's been since my last video, and let's get into things. Tummens are one of many types of human in the Afterworld. They're best known for their incredible strength, which allows them to beat up vampires, beat down trolls, beat the elderly, and with incredible ease, beat off you. Tummens aren't a species or subspecies of their own, being humans with a genetic condition. This is unlike the French, who aren't human at all. Despite this, Tummens are still biologically different from the normal humans of Earth, the biggest differences being that Tummens are naturally capable of force creation and magic production. Other differences include faster healing, having special nerves in their hands and feet, being naturally afraid of different things, reduced fertility, altered metabolism, and weird dietary preferences. Let's start with force creation. Force creation is the ability to take magic in your body and turn it into force. A lot of animal species are naturally capable of it, and so are some types of human, not just Tummens. Tummens are special in their force creation, at least among humans, because theirs is very efficient and they can do a lot with it. My uncle could do a whole lot with a single needle, like infect me with dozens of diseases. Tummens use force creation for force strength, force protection, and force puppeteering. Force strength is fairly self-explanatory, adding to the force behind a Tummen's movements and exertions. Tummens can do this in all of their muscles, so in addition to punching harder, a Tummen can use force strength to lift heavier objects, throw things further, jump higher, and run, climb, and swim faster than they'd be able to otherwise. There's at least one case of a Tummen using force strength to jump onto a roof and use its chimney as a toilet, right as a child was sat patiently waiting for Sandy Claus to bring them toys on Christmas night. The average Tummen is stronger than a grizzly bear, silverback gorilla, or even a man with muscles from Brussels, but all of that strength is concentrated into a body that's not much heavier than a normal human. This is great if a Tummen is trying to move themselves, like when running or jumping, but terrible if they're trying to move something else, like pushing along a boulder or a very stubborn cow. That said, Tummens can get around this by wearing heavy clothing or armour. Force protection is the creation of force in a user's body to stop them from being hurt by blunt impacts and pressure. Blunt impacts can include things like being hit with clubs or slamming into the ground after falling from a cliff. Pressure includes things like being crushed under the weight of a rock or being squished between Omni-Man's thick, muscular, oiled up, hot, beautiful booty cheeks. What was I saying? Oh yeah. This includes protection from their own force creation, which would otherwise tear them apart. Force protection is practically instant and doesn't require any thinking or awareness from a Tummen, so even in their sleep, Tummens are safe from being beaten to death with hammers, unlike Timmy, who never stood a chance. Force protection is also involuntary, so Tummens can't choose to be vulnerable to the things it protects them from. Tummens can still be knocked around and thrown around, obeying the law of conservation of momentum and only weighing a little bit more than normal humans. If someone is strong enough to punch someone else into a wall, grab them by their foot and slam them into the floor so hard that it breaks the floor, also known as how my uncle used to treat me, then they can do it to a Tummen. However, the Tummen won't be hurt by it and is plenty capable of returning the favour. Force protection doesn't, however, protect Tummens from fire, frostbite, acid, oxygen deprivation, cringy childhood memories, and anything else that doesn't count as a blunt impact or pressure. It can help with being slashed or stabbed, but only if the cut isn't straight or the blade isn't sharp. A little girl with well-kept hair scissors is more dangerous to an unarmoured Tummen than a bodybuilder with a heavy club. Force puppeteering is the making of force to move one's body or hold a position. This is useful if the Tummen's body isn't otherwise able to move or hold a position, such as because of shattered bones, blood loss, muscle damage, nerve damage, exhaustion, illness, certain types of paralysis, and even psychological attacks, like being commanded to stay still or fall to their knees by Fell, who can command people as long as eye contact is maintained, be Lich from Adventure Time, or a goth girl with a sultry voice. So long as a Tummen isn't dead or unconscious, they can still work, run and fight. Tummens can also use force puppeteering when stretching, or to dislocate their joints at will. Force puppeteering can easily injure Tummens, or make whatever injuries they have worse, so Tummens usually avoid using it outside of life and death situations. Tummens who move with force puppeteering usually have clumsy, jerky movements that could be mistaken for spasms. As it happens, the Afterworld is home to a disease that can reanimate corpses into undead, which also move with force puppeteering and also have jerky movements. This, in combination with Tummens usually being pretty badly injured by the time they're using force puppeteering at all, sometimes gets them mistaken for the undead. Two abilities that might have come to your small, pathetic mind as possible with force creation are unpowered flight, similar to Superman, Viltrumite and my mate Larry, or telekinesis, moving things with your mind, similar to the Jedi, Matilda and my mate Larry. Unpowered flight isn't possible because Tummens obey the law of conservation of momentum, and telekinesis isn't possible because Tummens only create force inside of their own bodies. Force creation is fueled by magic, so a Tummen with no magic left in their body is as weak if not weaker than a normal human, could be beaten to death with a frying pan, and can't walk on broken legs. Tummens make magic in their bodies from energy, which they get from the food they eat. This means having to eat more, and to aid in that, Tummens have developed larger, stronger stomachs than those of humans, as well as stronger teeth that regrow if they are damaged or fall out. They can also use small amounts of force strength to easily chew things that are hard for normal humans, like raw meat, bark, bones, sweet wood, and so on. Tummens who use their abilities more need to eat more, and turning calories directly into force is more efficient than turning calories into magic and then magic into force. So Tummens who don't want massive food bills either don't use their abilities often, or use their abilities in ways that net them more money or food in return, like hunting massive animals. Ridiculously strong, unharmed by heavy impacts, able to fight despite horrendous injuries, and eating food like the IRS eats my wallet. The average Tummen is a fighting anime character. Tummens have limits on how much magic they can make at a time, how much magic they can store in their bodies, and how much magic they can convert into force in any given moment. These limits vary between Tummens based on things like genetics, diet, health, age, being built different, body modifications, being a named character, and so on. Tummens who regularly push themselves to their limits will see them increase over time, and those that never push themselves will see their limits stay the same or decrease. An elderly, unhealthy Tummen who barely eats and hasn't trained or fought once in their life is likely to be weaker than a normal human, whereas a young, well-fed, well-rested and thoroughly trained Tummen could probably lift a truck full of Funko Pops and then throw them into a pit of hellfire where they belong. That said, it is pretty common for Tummens who look extremely skinny to be stronger than Tummens who look very bulky, because the Tummens who are skinny are those who have deliberately used their force creation instead of their muscles as much as possible, and in doing so developed greater force capabilities. Not all of Tummen biology is magic in nature. In addition to improved reflexes and fighting instincts, Tummens have special nerves in their hands and feet, which are good at detecting vibrations, including those from the Tummen's own body. These seem to have evolved to help Tummens avoid screwing themselves over with their strength. For a process similar to echolocation, they use the echoes of vibrations created by their heartbeats to know the strength, weight, shape, size, and more of anything they touch with their hands or feet. This somewhat applies to the ground or floor they're standing on, including how much weight they'd have to carry to sink into the ground or break and fall through the floor. This process is more effective when a Tummen stays still, takes their time, has more points of contact such as 2 feet planted into the ground or 2 hands pressed against a boulder, and is able to concentrate without distractions. Tummens aren't immune to the cold, heat, poisonous gases or anything else not covered by force protection. A Tummen who accidentally tears their shelter down in the middle of a snowstorm will probably freeze to death. A Tummen who underestimates how heavy a boulder is and tries to lift it, even though it's actually heavier than their force creation can handle, will likely snap their spine, be crushed under the boulder, and potentially die. A Tummen who works in a mansion and lifts a piano with ease only to fall through the floor and be impaled on the horns of a monster statue in the floor below will probably die of organ damage and bleeding. A Tummen in a swamp who tries to hold a log above their heads only for the weight to make them sink into the mud and get stuck is essentially a free meal for any predator that comes along, especially since Tummens aren't protected from sharp things and so are vulnerable to claws and teeth. Tummens have a deep, instinctive fear of lifting anything so heavy that it can make them fall through the floor or sink into the ground. All of this is to say, these nerves and Tummen instincts are great for keeping them out of trouble. I am currently in trouble because of my organ harvesting operations. Tummens can also use their vibration detection to map out their surroundings and detect living things nearby, but only over short distances. This doesn't make Tummens perfect at not bumping into things in the dark, nor is it impossible to sneak up on them, but it does make both less likely. A lot of animals have also developed vibration detection, and predators and prey alike of these animals have developed ways to avoid making noticeable vibrations, while some humans have developed special shoes and methods of walking. Tummens are naturally creeped out by both the animals and the people here, comparing them to how it would feel to hear an invisible creature, knowing exactly where it is by the sound it produces, but not being able to see it. Tummens still have eyes and ears, so Tummens that get the most use out of this are those who are blind and so can still find their way around, or are deaf and so can feel the vibrations that people's bodies make when they're talking as a substitute for hearing them. Like blind people developing better hearing and deaf people developing better sight, Tummens who are blind or deaf develop better vibration sense, mapping out their surroundings and detecting living things over greater distances and with greater accuracy. A lot of Tummen bloodlines have mutations that cause poor eyesight and hearing, but aren't naturally selected out of existence because their vibration detection lets them survive anyway. Tummens, blind or not, are great at detecting if an earthquake is going to happen soon, as they can feel the smaller vibrations before the big ones hit. When an earthquake is happening, Tummens tend to become very paranoid, because one of their key senses is overwhelmed and it becomes much easier to sneak up on them. Vibrations can easily move through bone, metal and wood, but have a harder time moving through soft things like cushions, furs and clothing. Most Tummens instinctively prefer to sleep on wooden floors rather than beds, because their body can snap them awake if it detects any concerning vibrations. That said, Tummens who grow up being kept awake by vibrations, such as because their home is next to a busy street or because their parents are trying to make them a new sibling, often learn to prefer soft beds. Tummens slowly and unconsciously learn to recognize the vibrations of people they spend time with, similar to how people recognize your ugly face, your annoying voice, and your awful stench. With training, they can learn to tell if someone's ill, injured, what they're feeling, or even if someone is lying through the vibrations of their body. But this usually requires that the Tummen be directly touching the person, rather than just standing near them. Some of the Afterworld's best doctors are either Tummens or have Tummen assistants, who spend years training to be able to locate tumours, bone cracks, blood clots, tissue damage and so on in people's bodies just by touching them. Rumour has it they can also tell if an otherworlder used to work in the British Parliament and should therefore be euthanised. Tummens also instinctively know about the problems in their own bodies, as they instinctively press their hands against themselves every now and then, as well as during their sleep. Knowing about their own health problems pairs really well with their healing abilities. Tummens use magic to regrow damaged tissue faster than normal humans can, closing wounds and healing cracks quite quickly, but they instinctively take this further with their abilities. Force creation creates and relieves pressure, while vibration detection gathers precise information about the damage to a Tummen's body. Most highly magical types of people like Brigilds, Chrysa and Athlefs heal about 4 times faster than normal humans, whereas Tummens take this to 8 times faster than normal. Other types of humans have been quoted complaining that it's not fair for Tummens to be both the best at operating despite injuries with their force puppeteering and the best at healing from them at the same time. Tummens have been quoted responding with such words as cope, mould, seethe and sucks to suck. Tummens also have incredibly strong immune systems, but this isn't particularly unique and they aren't immune to everything. Now, reproduction and genetics. Since I don't want YouTube taking this video down, some details have been left out and remain to your imagination. Tummens are people with a complex genetic condition, not a species, subspecies, or even ethnicity of their own. This means that there's no such thing as a half Tummen, you have the condition or you don't. It secondly means that Tummens can be very varied, depending on what ethnicity and subspecies they're part of, as well as what other genetic conditions they have. Though most Tummens are members of the Tumekis ethnicity, so I'll be talking about them later as well. The DNA that causes someone to be a Tummen isn't inherited normally, because it's contained in their mitochondria rather than their nucleus. You inherit half of your nucleus DNA from each of your parents, but your mitochondrial DNA only comes from your mother. This means that the children of female Tummens will always be Tummens, but the children of male Tummens will only be Tummens if their mother is a Tummen as well. Tummen genes can mix with other genes to have interesting effects. Tummens of the Hami ethnicity are abnormally weak, while Tummen aniline hybrids have abnormally large wings. Tummen vampires are several times stronger than normal humans and vampires put together, but need so much blood that it's basically impossible for them to survive long term. They also tend to cause a lot of damage before dying. The majority of Tummens are part of the Tumekis ethnicity. Tumekis and Tummen genetics go really well together, likely because the Tummens and Tumekis have existed alongside each other so long that each has evolved to match the other's presence. Tumekis Tummens are typically healthier and stronger than non-Tumekis Tummens. Tumekis themselves generally have improved reflexes, slightly increased muscle density, black or dark brown hair, olive skin, and are short, which in turn applies to most Tummens. Tummens naturally find Tumekis and people with Tumekis-like traits more attractive than other humans. Tummens of both sexes tend to have fertility problems, reducing the number of kids they're likely to have. It's likely because of this that Tummens are less attracted to other Tummens than they are to non-Tummens, since Tummens only reproducing with non-Tummens results in more Tummens being born overall. It's also pretty helpful for reducing inbreeding and the Alabama plagues that come with it. Tummens are a minority of the Tumekis population and can often be quite spread out, so a lot of the time two Tummens living in the same area are likely to be related and should therefore keep their hands off of one another's merchandise, unless they're coughing of Andy and Lele fans. Every Tummen adult was once a Tummen child. Tummens are born with the capacity for force creation, which gets stronger as they grow, especially during puberty. However, Tummens aren't capable of force strength or force puppeteering until puberty, so they benefit from force protection without the obvious downsides one can expect from making a child strong enough to destroy furniture, animals, and people with ease. Not being able to deliberately use force creation and having it in smaller amounts also reduces the amount Tummen children need to eat, so they're not as hard to provide for. However, Tummens will sometimes gain access to force strength and force puppeteering early, usually during life or death situations where it helps them to survive. This has led to some Tummen clans making it a tradition to deliberately endanger and traumatize Tummen children so that they can start using and training in their abilities at an earlier age, although this can come with the downside of creating a psychological association between using one's abilities and being terrified, which can result in Tummens that are only able to access their abilities when afraid or angry. Creating associations in my head between gambling and being happy is why my bank balance is always in the red. Magic, the main thing that fuels Tummen force creation, is made from energy. Tummens are drawn to slow burn starchy foods like bread, potatoes, rice, tortillas, oats, and my uncle's extra special bacterial super special super soup, which doubles as a trial by fire for the immune system and has a 15% survival rate. Within the Afterworld specifically, that also includes starch fruit, sweet wood, seed bark, and the starchy fat reserves of plant-animal hybrids, such as branch terrors. Now that we've talked about their biology, we must cover the fact that Tummens do, in fact, live in a society. The majority of Tummens live in a land called Lamara, which is special because it's actually a nice place to live. Places which aren't Lamara usually have such problems as extreme temperatures, radiation, poisonous air, nothing to eat or drink, the laws of physics not working properly, horrific diseases, creatures of French descent, and among other things, creatures that seem to have been crafted from meth, steroids, and nightmare fuel. Lamara, in comparison, is so hospitable to human life that most people think it was made by divine beings specifically for human life, with plentiful food, clean rivers, and a general lack of man-eating wildlife. This has caused Lamara to have a lot of genetic variety and types of people, because people from all over the known world have been moving to Lamara since time immemorial. For a lot of Lamara's known history, it's also been a giant war zone, as different peoples have fought one another over its land. A land engulfed by war is one where people who can hit really hard, wear really heavy armor without it slowing them down, move at incredible speeds, leap over obstacles like walls and ditches, keep fighting despite horrendous injuries, recover from injuries really quickly, are hard to sneak up on, and can provide information about items and structures just by touching them, would normally thrive. However, the part of Lamara they first arrived to was Chrysland, and so the Tummens and their Tumekan followers were defeated, subjugated, and subject to forced religious conversions by the Chrysa and Chryslanders, who then used them as soldiers for their own conquests. Tummens and Tumekis have been given spots of land spread across Lamara to reward them for their military services, but don't have a single homeland within Lamara where most of them live, unlike the Kreisa having Christland, Yarlands having Yarland, or Annelims having the Chained Isles. Some of these Tumekan pockets of land have mostly retained their old culture, which is extremely warlike and engages in eugenics, whereas others have assimilated into or formed hybrid cultures with the peoples around them. Tummens being spread across Lamara also means they're more likely to find themselves fighting other Tummens during local and civil wars, which has led to a lot of Tummen clans absolutely hating each other, and a general lack of that sense of unity and sameness that's common for other types of magic people. A lot of Tummens and Tumekis are also part of the cult of Hafnir, and believe that Hafnir is the ancestor goddess of the Tummens. Currently, Lamara is ruled by a single empire, the Lamaran Unity, which enforces a religion claiming that magic people such as Tummens are demigods. For Tummens, this means extra rights, privileges and protections, such as those who commit crimes against them facing bigger punishments, but also obligations and restrictions. Parents and caretakers of Tummen children aren't allowed to kill them, starve them, sterilize them, abandon them, enslave them, harvest their organs, or subject them to harmful body modifications, except tattoos, branding and decorative scarring. In comparison, normal human children have to hope that their parents don't think like Rimworld characters. The temple, Lamara's main religious organisation, has a department of priests that are expected to seize any Tummen child who's obviously suffering from life-endangering levels of neglect or abuse, though in practice these priests are often blackmailed, threatened or bribed into either doing nothing or even taking Tummen children that are actually in normal, healthy households. Slavery and the organ trade are both huge in Lamara, and Tummens are valuable in both. Tummens produce most of their magic in their organs, so harvesting a Tummen's organs and putting them into a normal person who can't spend that magic in any way is a fairly effective way to turn the normal human into a magic juice box. My uncle used to use me as a blood juice box back when he thought he was a vampire. Tummens who are unmarried at 21 or older are allowed to choose their own spouses, even those their parents or clan leaders don't approve of. This is mostly a thing because Tummens are often born into clans, wealthy families and noble houses, which will sometimes prevent their members from marrying or having children as part of power games, eugenics and taking advantage of inheritance laws. The Crown really doesn't care for these shenanigans, seeing them as going against the spirit of the laws they take advantage of, and wants there to be more Tummens to serve in its armies. Speaking of which, Tummens, especially female Tummens, are heavily encouraged by the temple to marry and reproduce. A married Tummen with no priest is likely to get random visits from fertility priests, whose job is to convince the Tummen to have kids if they don't want any, or push the Tummen to seek fertility treatments if they're trying but aren't getting any results. These priests often end up doubling as unofficial marriage counsellors, especially since most Tummens are in marriages that were arranged by their parents or clan leaders. However, these priests aren't actually trained in any form of counselling beyond just trying to convince unhappy couples that having a kid will fix their issues, and also handing out free aphrodisiacs like it's candy on Halloween. Tummens that live in Crown territories are required to work for the Crown for 3 months out of every year. This can be substituted with paying a giant fine, which most Tummens prefer not to do. How wealthy Tummens are likely to be varies massively depending on what part of Lamara they live in, but they're generally not as wealthy as other types of magic people, simply because their abilities aren't considered as valuable as those of many other types of magic people. Tummens are strong, but so are large animals, groups of normal humans working together, vampires that submit to enslavement and defanging rather than being killed, and John Cena, though I can't seem to see him anywhere. Tummens are fast, but Annelims can fly at hundreds of miles per hour, and Mirrans are capable of instant telepathy over any distance. Tummens are good at chiseling hard rock and hammering strong metals into shape, but Kreisa can grow 2 types of near unbreakable crystal from their skin in any shape they want. Tummens are capable of vibration detection, but so are multiple other, less food-demanding types of human, like Underfolk, Nightskins, Foglanders, and the Blindsighted. A big exception to this is military organisations, which will pay a lot to have Tummens in their ranks. Even though Tummens often can't compete with their alternatives in the workplace, they can on the battlefield, and I miss my ex-wife. Anonyms can be knocked out of the sky with spears thrown by Tummens. Vampires can be physically overpowered, beaten into submission, and held in place until the sun comes up. While Gratums and their vibration shenanigans don't hurt Tummens because of their force protection. Chrysler usually win fights against Tummens because their crystal spikes can easily penetrate any armour the Tummen is wearing, but Tummens win often enough that competent Chrysler warriors consider them a serious threat. And lastly, against normal humans, Tummens are able to dominate through a mix of speed, brute strength, and their vibration detection. On the note of them being really good at killing people, this is the end of the video. Enjoy reading the ending slides for credits and any extra information I forgot to mention. Click the like button, submit to subscription, and have a very nice day, even though you probably don't deserve it, you absolute waste of oxygen. Big thanks to Afterworld, who has made some of the music you can hear in this video, and whose channel will be linked below. The names of artists and where I found their works are always on their art as it appears, so that it's nice and easy for you to check out anyone you're interested in. Massive thanks to the Universe Anvil and its members for being cool. I also send my regards to my local mafia, as it was very gracious of them to extend the time I have left to pay off my debts to them before they turn me into fish food. Most of all, thank you for spending the limited time you have left on this earth watching one of my creations. Also, I've written a song and it might be released soon, so watch out for that. And before you go, here are some other world building channels you might like. They should satiate your need for endless world building content, at least until my next video.